All right, good. And we are live.
All right.
Huzzah.
We'll go then, I guess, in three, two, one. And hello to all of you out there in podcast world. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies. I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and this is another edition of Front Row Classics. And I have here with me my very trusty friend, Jeremy Geckner.
I mean, you really should just say sidekick. I mean,
Well, you're the
trusty
editor-in-chief.
sidekick.
I can't really call you sidekick when you're the editor-in-chief.
Hey, in the realm of classics, you are Adam West, and I am definitely Burt Ward. So,
Oh, nice reference to our last classics podcast. So,
exactly. See what I did there? Yeah, you got that.
which I think Scott and I spent more time laughing during than actually talking.
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy with that movie. I mean, come on. There's shark repellent, and some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, that was a good episode, and really glad you guys paid a really good tribute there to Adam West. It was very nice to listen to.
Yeah, it was something where I know he and I both talked about would it be a classic, would it be a flashback, and it was something we were going to get to eventually, but it just seemed like the right time to kind of get it in there. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But we're making a complete 180 this episode.
slightly a 180.
But you know what though? I've been kind of tracking where classics has been going, and last summer we really sort of hit the film noir genre hard, where you and Allison and I talked about Chinatown, and then the McFarlanes and I talked about Double Indemnity. So it's only fitting this summer that we hit film noir again.
I'm wondering if this film will be an influence on those. Maybe a preview of discussions to come.
Probably. But yeah, we're talking about really the movie that I guess you can kind of track as the first film noir. And it is 1941's The Maltese Falcon. And one of my favorite movies of all time. And the second time we've talked about Bogart here on Classics. Haven't talked about him since episode 2, Casablanca.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, we're hitting the. Yeah. I don't know. Some might say the African Queen, but I think these are his two best performances as an actor.
Yeah, these are his two. Definitely his star-making performances. I think some people would consider his performance in Treasure of Sierra Madre to be his best. But
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, this one is. I personally, I think Bogart's good, and even if the movie is bad, Bogart is good, and I don't think I've ever seen him be bad. Nobody ever like him, I don't think, in the history of movies. Just fantastic, and this is a fantastic movie. What were your first impressions of the Maltese Falcon when you first saw it?
You know, this is another one that I saw for the first time when you and I were going through the AFI's top 100 for the first time. And yes, I reiterate, for the first time, people. But it's one of those movies where, again, like, and if you haven't heard the story from the past episodes of Classics, it's just, Brandon is kind of really instrumental in getting me to watch a lot of these older movies because of the AFI list. And this is one of those where I don't understand how more people haven't seen this film and haven't appreciated this film in terms of just sitting down and watching it, because look, it's not a long movie. It's like an hour, 36 minutes or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, the mystery just unfolds so clearly and so naturally in this movie that it really, so many times in a mystery film, you get just a convoluted plot where it's hard to keep track of people. In this one, the plot actually flows very evenly, and it really lets the actors stretch their muscles here. I mean, we'll talk a lot about Bogart because, and rightfully so, he's phenomenal in this movie. Mm-hmm. But, Mary Astor and Peter Lorre, they get so many cool things to do as characters. And even I don't know who he is, but the guy playing Vilmer or whatever his name is. Wilmer, yeah. He is amazing in that final sequence. And I mean, really great acting. It's one of those movies that, if you sat down to watch it, you would not move. You would not need to get up and go to the bathroom. You would not go get a drink, because you would just be transfixed on the screen. And that's exactly what you are when watching this. And that's how I felt watching it. I was just like, wow, this is just such great raw filmmaking right here.
It's one of those movies to me where it's got a lot of plot to it, but in the end, the plot doesn't matter really because it's all about the characters and it's all
Hmm.
about how they interact and the whole like lore of the Maltese Falcon, even in the little crawl that they put in the beginning, giving you the history of the Maltese Falcon. That
Yeah.
doesn't matter whatsoever. It's style over substance there.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. It doesn't matter in the slightest. You could not have that crawl and
yeah,
it wouldn't make one bit of
but
difference.
but but you're so glad it's there because it lends to the air of the movie, and just of course later on in the way that Sidney Greenstreet as Gutman will tell you, his feelings about the Falcon and everything, and
Yeah.
it's just an amazing movie directed by the amazing John Huston, who we've talked about as an actor before in Chinatown,
Yeah. Which
but
I'm
this
just
is our
gonna
first
say,
time
after
talking.
watching Chinatown, it's really, really hard to think of him as just a great director with that part he played.
Yeah,
It's really hard to get that
yeah.
dastardly part out of him.
Yeah, this is his directorial debut. So
Was it really?
yeah, he'd been a writer for year. He'd been a writer for years in Hollywood, and this was his first chance at being a director. And
Wow.
and he actually made this and another movie right after, and then went off into World War II for a couple of years. Which, if you haven't seen the Netflix documentary Five Came Back, he's one of the directors that are covered in that documentary,
I did
and
not watch that yet.
it's amazing. But yeah, John Huston, a prolific director. I mean, African Queen, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Red Badge of Courage, The Asphalt Jungle, Key Largo. I mean,
You'd put him on the Mount
tons.
Rushmore of directors. I mean, I think
Yeah,
you'd have to.
absolutely. And we'll forget that he directed Annie, but
As we all want to forget Annie.
it was it was the mid '80s, and he was in his '80s.
He's looking for a kid's thing. Why not?
Yeah, so it was, we'll look over that because his input is far, superior to his later, work. So
Sure.
we'll go on to that. But yeah, this is just one of those quintessential. It has everything you're looking for in a film noir. It really sort of set the style, and really, um, if you read about Hollywood lore like I do, film noir is really one of the few film movements that we in America can kind of call our own. In France and in Germany and in England, they've all had their sort of own film movements, but we've kind of borrowed from them. Film noir was really kind of the real film movement that took place, in the years, especially following World War II, when the
Hmm.
world became a little more cynical. But this was sort of the whole start of it, just in the way it's filmed. Arthur Edison, the director of photography, the shadows and the light that he uses, and
Oh,
I think about specific shots, just like the way that the spade and archer sign on their window is lit on the floor at the very beginning.
yeah. Yeah, and
And
it's like, and they took such great care to like after Archer is no more, after Archer gets killed in this, to like really put the Samuel part of that sign
yeah,
like really prominent in those later scenes.
yeah, absolutely. And this really, if you think about this is 1941 and pre World War II when this movie was being made, and to have characters this shady, and to have and to have really the hero of your movie being not a great person,
No,
and
all
Sam
right.
Spade. It was really a daring piece of work,
Sam
and
Spade is an asshole. All right, he is. He's the original asshole hero. All right.
and he's even more so in the book. If anyone wants to go read the book by Dashiell Hammett, one of the best mystery writers of all time, who actually worked as a detective and used some of his experiences in his novels. But
Wow.
Spade is even more of a shady character in the books. The production code being what it was, this is kind of watered down Spade, which is kind of hard to believe.
Wow.
But
Yeah. Gosh, dude, does he binge drink too? I mean, come on.
but uh, but yeah, it's just amazing, just the rapid fire dialogue and the way that Houston really takes Houston uses, because Houston wrote and directed most of his own movies as well. So Houston took the best of Hammett's words and his words and just sort of fused them together. And the script is one of the best things about this movie too. I mean,
Oh
just
yeah.
we'll talk about some of the great lines in it later too, but it's
Well,
just
I
it
mean,
just
no,
from
yeah,
beginning to end.
Yeah, it's kind of like a precursor to like a Tarantino or an Aaron Sorkin in the way that the
Yeah.
dialogue is written. You know, there's a lot of information condensed there, but he assumes that you're going to be smart enough to track it, and he assumes that it's going to be interesting enough for you to want to track it. And that's really something that's very prevalent in the way that, say, an Aaron Sorkin wrote The West Wing, or in the way that Tarantino writes pretty much all of his movies. You know, he gives you a lot of information really, really quickly, but he assumes that you're going to be able to go on that journey with him. And you're right, the parallels are very big there.
Yeah. And I guess just to give a little plot, I don't want to give. I mean, we will be spoiling this later, but not to give a whole lot away in terms of plot, though.
It's 76 years old, people.
this movie's about a private investigator named Sam Spade in San Francisco, and he has a partner, Miles Archer, and they run their own detective agency. And one day, this client named Miss Wonderly, in quotes,
First name, first time
comes,
we hear one of her names.
comes comes by and is looking for her missing sister because she thinks she's involved with a guy named Floyd Thursby, and has
Just a
no idea
great
where her
name, by the
sister
way.
is. And Spade has got something to do that night. Archer agrees to follow her, and Archer is murdered that night. And you see in a great shot the way that Archer is murdered, because you just see the gun. You see him walking up to like a shadowy figure, and then see his expression change, and then see him shot and rolling down a hill.
Yeah.
And just a great shot scene. And then the next day sort of begins the fallout of all this. Some people suspect Spade because apparently he's been involved with Archer's wife, who's just a crying lunatic throughout the movie.
No, we're gonna get to her, man. Oh, poor
and,
Gladys George.
and then he starts to learn more things, that Miss Wonderly is actually not who she appears to be. Her name is really Bridget O'Shaughnessy. And then he is startled in his office one night by this mysterious guy named Joel Cairo, who is looking for the Blackbird. And I can't do a Peter Lorre impression, but the Blackbird, Mr. Spade. You know?
That was pretty good. That's pretty good, man. Just gotta get into the more that it's alive.
I know. It's hard. I don't do a great Bogart or Peter Lorre, but this is the podcast that cries out for him. But
Yes.
but we learn more and more about this Maltese Falcon is what all these people are after. He's led to this other guy named Casper Gutman, played by Sidney Greenstreet, who we'll talk a lot about later too.
Yeah,
And
he's wonderful.
and he learns that O'Shaughnessy is mixed up in all of this and the fallout from everything, and it all ends up in one fantastic, I think, like 20-minute scene just between like the five characters at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just great. And of course, we find out that the Falcon is a fake, and everybody's been chasing after it for nothing. And it's the stuff that dreams are made of, as we kind of learn at the end.
What a great! It's not the final line, I don't think. Is it the final line?
It is the final line. It's not the final shot.
Then we get like another minute of him just looking at people. Yeah, all right. So that's a damn good final line of a movie.
Yeah, just absolutely amazing. But let's begin here talking about the cast. And of course, you got to start at the top with Humphrey Bogart. This was his star-making role. He'd been around Hollywood for about 6 or 7 years, really hadn't made it big. And he'd been playing like second lead. He was always the gangster that got killed by Cagney right before the end of the movie, or something like that. Or he's in a bunch of interesting things. Like he's in Dark Victory with Bette Davis, and he plays an Irish horse master or something like this, and his Irish accent is a little embarrassing.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. God.
This is Houston, first-time director, took a chance on sort of an unproven character actor at the time to helm his movie, and boy, did it pay off. And
times have we heard that working in Hollywood history? I mean, it's those who take the chances on the people that show solid work in smaller roles. You take the chance and you get rewarded.
Yeah, because Bogart, and I don't remember if we talked about this in Casablanca or not, but he didn't have those Cary Grant looks. He didn't have, that sort of, or even like a Jimmy Stewart sort of, down home feel to him. He was a very unique looking actor, very unique sounding actor. Really, if you were to look at him on the street, probably wouldn't think this is movie star material, but something about him when he got in front of the camera just something just clicked, and he is magnetic. He's charismatic. You can't take your eyes off of him when he's on screen, and this part of very few other parts fit him to a T like Sam Spade does.
Oh yeah, and I mean like just the just the breadth of characters that come after him in the same mold is just staggering. And I mean, like, it can go through every single genre. I mean, you know, obviously the comparisons like Jake Giddy's in Chinatown is like really, really perfect. But, you know, take it even further, like a Deckard in Blade Runner, like, you know, any kind of lone wolf kind of, you know, I watch out for me, but I do have some morals, but I'm not going to let you know what they are, but I'm fighting on the side of the angels, even if I have to do dastardly things. Every single character like that you've ever seen in a movie comes from Sam Spade. And it's, you know, it's kind of like now it's entered into the movie lexicon of like, oh, that's the Sam Spade character. Like, you know, like that it's a character type now. And it's because it was so iconic and everything. Take a drink, everyone. But like, this is, this is the show for iconicism, you know, like it's, you're right. Like in terms of when he gets on screen, it's something I don't think you can be taught, even if you want to as an actor. There's just like a look and you use the exact right word, a magnetism. It's just, there's something ferocious there, and there's something just so otherworldly almost, you know, like I think Marlon Brando had the same quality. It's just when he's on screen, you cannot stop watching him. And this one especially, because I imagine at the time this was kind of a shockwave, this kind of a character, because it's just, it's so like Sam has a moral center. He does. It's very small, but you know, like he does have a code. And I love the final scene that he has with Bridget, is that, you know, where he's talking about why he's going to turn her in. And it's just like, you can see that there's just kind of this weary catatonicness on his face in terms of this. I do have feelings for you. I don't want to turn you in, but a man's got to do what he's got to do. And there's got to be a code to some of this. There has to be a moral center coming from the person that's been like the amoral center of the entire movie.
I know. Yeah. But the thing about Sam Spade is you can't predict what he's going to do ever.
No.
I mean, because he has a partner that he never really liked, never really cared about, was stepping
going
out
behind
with
his back with his wife.
And yet when his partner dies, he feels like he has to avenge his death because that's just the code. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, that's his whole motivation. It's what he tells O'Shaughnessy. It's just like, you know, when your partner dies, you have to do something about it. And it's like, what? That's your code? It's like, what? You don't even like the guy. You never did. You took his name off the door like a few hours after he died.
And here he is. And here he is, this private detective, and none of the police like him. You know, the two cops that follow him through the whole movie are always suspicious of him. They think he did it. And you know, he's always, I love the digs that he does at you know, Dundee, you know, calling them each other's girlfriends.
Well, I mean, like, and that goes to what makes like him such a great just regular character in the movie itself, is just like he's got Sam Spade obviously has all the confidence in the world. And I mean, like his partner's shot, the cops come to question him about it, and he acts like it's just a minor inconvenience, where most of us would be freaking out if we saw cops there questioning us for something we know we didn't do. But he's just they're like, oh, well, have a drink with me, you know, like it's a cool and calm collectedness that goes throughout the entire movie. And actually the secretary Effie, right?
Effie,
yeah, like she even comments on it, you know, like you always think that, you know, like you're 2 steps ahead of everyone. You always think you have all the answers. And it's kind of like, as we see him throughout the course of this movie, he actually does. You know, it's an earned, I guess the only way to put it, it's an earned like smart assness that he has. You know, it's not brash bravado that he can't back up. He is 2 steps ahead of everyone.
And you mentioned Effie, and I will talk about her now because I don't think we'll get to her later. But it's interesting because she's really the only character that he really has a genuine relationship with.
Yep.
in this movie. She's the only person he 100% completely trusts, and you know,
Oh yeah.
and he doesn't mind putting her in danger. I mean, she's the one who goes and gets the Falcon.
Why would he? Why would he mind putting her in danger? Just another step forward for moral Sam
Yeah,
Spade. No, but
I
you're right.
love.
Like it is interesting that she, he does trust her completely. I mean, it really is that Girl Friday
Yeah,
type of relationship there, and obviously that was big in a lot of noirs, but it works because of Bogart's delivery too. Like, never let it be said that like Bogart was a fantastic actor. He played a really wide range of parts his whole career, and he actually had a lot of skill. But this is quintessential vintage what you think of when you think of Bogart. The
oh yeah,
lone wolf that's there, that's slick, that's sly, that doesn't panic. He's always cool. He always has a wisecrack, and that magnetism, like you said.
yeah. And I love that he's just always one step ahead of everything. I'm skipping, but my favorites. I love the scene where he and Wilmer are walking to Gutman's in the hallway, and he disarms Wilmer, both guns and everything,
Yep.
and without even blinking. And I love that line. Come on, this will put you in solid with your boss.
Yeah. It's like some homeless guy took him off him, told him to give it back.
Oh, I love it. I
It's,
love it.
I mean, you just get the sense there that he's just like messing with him just because he can.
Oh, he
Like,
loves
and
to
it's
him. And he has
Wilmer. I feel bad for Wilmer, man. He gets the shaft this whole movie. We'll talk
oh
about it
yeah,
for a
yeah,
little, but
but Bogart, yeah, just I can't. This is one of those you can't imagine any other person. And I think I mentioned in our Some Like It Hot podcast, this was offered to George Raft, the actor who played Spats Columbo in that
yeah.
movie. And like I said, George Raft had the worst taste in scripts because he turned both this Casablanca and Double Indemnity down.
Yeah, so pretty much Bogart owes his career to Raft. So
Bogart owes his
here,
career, and Fred McMurray owes his best role too.
there you go. George Raft, the unsung hero of classic Hollywood.
But yeah, so and of course Bogart and John Huston would kind of forge this sort of director actor partnership, very much in the same way that John Wayne would with John Ford, or you think of Johnny Depp with Tim Burton, or De
Yeah.
Niro with Scorsese. So it really began a lot of things with this movie. But let's move on to the femme fatale of this movie, Bridget O'Shaughnessy herself, Mary Astor. And there are parts of Mary Astor's performance in this movie where it's her performance in this movie, and I would say Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity. Every other woman in any kind of film noir type movie borrows something from those two performances. And
Definitely.
and when Mary Astor first comes on the screen as Miss Wonderly, you can tell something's up from the beginning. I mean, she's just a little too prim, a little too proper. There's something going on behind her eyes there, and you never, and like Sam Spade, you never quite buy what she's saying. And
Yeah.
and yet for some reason, just like Bogart, there's something very charismatic about her, and you're drawn into what you want to believe her, but you don't.
Oh yeah, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. She was a silent film star, wasn't she?
Yeah, she'd been around for a long time, and actually, it had. This was kind of a comeback for her because in the late 30s, I forget, I don't know if it was Hedda Hopper or Luella Parsons or one of those movie magazines, but they got a hold of her private diaries and released them, and she had like torrid affairs with guys like John Gilbert and John Barrymore, people like that.
Wow.
And so like in
How
the very
nice of them.
so, like in the very conservative era of the Great Depression, these sexual escapades of hers were kind of sent out to the world. She kind of thought her career was over, but it was sort of rebirthed in this movie. And
Well, you
it's
kind of
funny because
steered into the skid there a little bit with this
but she,
character.
but she was a very versatile actress because you think 3 years after this, after playing Bridget O'Shaughnessy, she's playing Mrs. Smith, Judy Garland's mother, in Meet Me in St. Louis.
Right.
So, so
Yeah.
it's never typecast, Mary Astor.
No, no. You're right. Like again, like all those great, femme fatale characters, you can kind of trace it back to this. And she doesn't play it with kind of like the knowing, like sneakiness of like Stanwyck in Double Indemnity or anything
No.
like that. Like right from the outset with Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, like you just know. I mean, like there's just that general air about her. This one, she actually kind of plays the fence pretty well. I mean, you're right. You get the sense that like, okay, after Archer's killed, you're like, something's not right here. Like,
Mhm.
it should have been an easy job here, and she set it up. So I mean, like, there's something weird there. And then her name changes, and you're like, okay, you're involved here in some way. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and it just kind of slowly unravels. But she's never like she never has like the Scooby Doo villain moment. It's like, I would have gotten away with it too. Come on and join me. But like her downfall at the end is kind of like a shock, not only to us but genuinely to her too.
Yeah, because I think she always feels like she's on the right side of everything. She genuinely thinks that. And then
Yeah.
when the mirror is put up in front of her at the end, and and he starts Bogart does that great bit of dialogue about her hanging by the gallows and her neck and all that stuff.
Oh
When it
man.
really starts to hit her with the gravity of what she's done, and of course that final shot of her going down the elevator where the doors slam almost like prison bars.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
exactly what I thought. Prison bars.
yeah, yeah, it's just she really sort of starts, but it's amazing how her character how she can turn all of a sudden. She's this weepy, very feminine presence with Bogart, but then when she and Joel Cairo get together for the first time, she becomes so aggressive and like kicks him and wound and and really
Yeah,
wounds him
yeah.
and everything.
Well, and I mean, like
And
you just hit upon that. The big part of that is just like she really. It's not an air that goes and permeates through the whole movie. You're right. It really changes based on her circumstance and based
yeah,
on who she's in the room with. Like she's trying to play Sam. I mean, like I often wonder this. Do you think she actually has genuine feelings for Sam? Because I think she kind of does.
she might. I don't know. I think that she's in love with whoever is there to rescue her.
True. No, you're right. You're right because I'm forgetting about like how like Thurlby and everybody else just like dies
Yeah.
around her. So
Yeah,
no, that's true.
yeah, but no, it's just, she's got this very world weariness about her almost, but and yet she's ready along with the rest of them to throw Wilmer under the bus.
Like a moment's notice. Poor
and yet
Wilmer.
and yet she can hold her own here with these very, looming presence like Gutman and Cairo and everything, and she's been around, she's been around the world and everything, and it's you're kind of even though you've kind of suspected something was up with her the whole movie, in the end when you find out she's the one who killed Archer and Thursby and everything, it does come as kind of a surprise.
It is. I mean, like you just assume that it's one of Wilmer or Thurlby himself or something like that. It actually is a genuine surprise that Bridget like pulls the trigger herself. That she
Mhm.
does that, and then it becomes once again. And I love that like Houston doesn't clarify it clearly for us.
Yeah.
It kind of turns into, okay, well, what do you believe? Do you think that she did it and that she is one of these like Stanwyck type of femme fatales? It's just always on and always playing a part, or was it an accident, like she says, and then she just kind of had to go with it? Has she been just kind of like this strung along? I'll see how far I can go with this whole Falcon chase around the world, or
Yeah.
has she really been? That way, is she really just kind of the dastardly mastermind after all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because like sort of like Bogart, she's a beautiful woman, but she's not your typical beauty of that time. So
Yeah.
they really complement each other well
Hmm.
in this movie, because there's a realness and a cynicism to them that a lot of actors of that time wouldn't have had.
Yeah,
But
I mean, they definitely strip the romanticism away. You're right.
yeah, it's really amazing, and she adds a lot to this movie. But let's move on now to we'll talk about really the three other major characters in this movie. Let's talk about the third major character we meet, Joel Cairo,
Oh,
played by
yes.
Peter Lorre, who one of, if not one of the greatest character actors from this
Undoubtedly.
era of film. Just the moment he steps on screen, with that unique look and that unique sound of his and everything, it's an unforgettable character, and he's so shady, but you like him, and he has this charm to him, and only who else can pull a gun on you and then get slapped incessantly by Bogart, and then pull the gun on you again.
Pull the gun back. And I mean, like, I love like that scene alone. Like, you're right. Like, when he comes in the first time to the office, it's, he's got those wide eyes that are always like bugged out. His voice is just so foreign, but yet soft and like understated and everything. But you're right. Like, I just love when he pulls the gun on Spade again after they've gone through all of this. After Spade's knocked him out with a punch to the face, and he's cleaned himself up. He reiterates it again. He pulls it on him again, and Sam literally can't stop laughing. And I think it's literally because he's just like, dude, I've already taken you down once. It's like, you want to go and search the office, go ahead. But it's like, you're right. Like, how can somebody consistently play that, like, that pathetic and that dangerous of a character at the same time? Like, it's an amazing dichotomy that he pulls off there, because when he's getting slapped around, you're almost just like, oh my God, he's like a defenseless little puppy. And then when he pulls the gun, you're just like, oh, he could actually kill him. And it's really a testament to what he can do that right there, like at a moment's notice.
Yeah, there's a menacing presence about him, and I think that's why he was so effective, later on when he did all the horror movies he did and everything. But yeah, it's interesting because they play him very effeminate, which was code, of course, at the time, for gay. But you couldn't say that at the time.
No.
But it's but no, it's just so interesting, his character, because he'll be all ready to cooperate one minute, and then, like we said, the next minute he'll have a gun on you.
He hires you one minute and then tries to search your office for the thing he just hired you to find anyway. Like,
he'll have these moments of great courage, like after they find out the Falcon is fake, and he just calls Gutman every name in the book, and and here's this little guy, with this huge man, just attacking him and everything, and
and he just lays into him too, and then like literally a split second later, he's weeping his butt off over in the chair.
Yeah, it's just it's really amazing, and I love the fact that even after Spade has smacked him around, Cairo still wants to hire him to find out where the bird is.
Well, I mean, like, Cairo's a businessman, but he's definitely got some shady dealings in his past and everything, but he ultimately just wants the job to get done. And it's interesting that I also really, really love the scene where the cops come over to Sam's place, and they're all like concocting the story about how they're just like, oh, we were just like messing around. We're gonna see how far we could get you to go and stuff. And there's just like, oh, is that what happened? He's like, I don't know what happened. Like he kind of has like that sardonicness, but he keeps it going really well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to match him, you have to have, as Gutman, this imposing figure, and Sidney Greenstreet in this movie, one of my favorite actors from this era. Just everything he did. It's interesting how he and Bogart and Laurie kind of became this team. The next year they were all in Casablanca together. Peter Lorre playing Ugarte, and Greenstreet playing Ferrari.
He was a Ferrari, wasn't he? Yeah, I totally forgot that.
And it's interesting. Both characters like to play the black market.
Never let it be said they don't have a type.
but no, the minute Greenstreet walks on screen, there's this elegance, but this danger about him. You don't want to mess with this guy, and you can't. When he's the greatest storyteller. When he's telling you the story about the Falcon, and and all the riches it could bring and everything, you can't turn away, because he's just such an imposing presence in this movie, and even Spade is kind of impressed by Gutman. It's amazing
Oh yeah,
because
I mean
he's
he's telling
so
this
in a
great
cynical
story.
guy.
He wants to collaborate with him, and then he drugs him. You know, it's just like one second he's telling you this elegant story about treasure and wanting to find the treasure and be there and
Yeah.
be the people that you've rediscovered this mythical thing, and then you're lying flat on your face in the middle of the floor, and it's just like you're right, just like that double-edged sword there. But you're right, he really. And I swear I'm not doing this just because he directed it, but he reminds me of John Huston in Chinatown a little bit. You know, like there's undoubtedly an evil center there, but there's a lot of charm on the outside too, as Gutman.
Well, and I'm pretty sure that Houston must have borrowed when he
I, I would
played
think.
when he played when he played Noah Cross. Because even though Noah Cross as evil as Gutman is, Noah Cross is just a little bit lower on the.
Just slightly.
But
Just go watch Chinatown if you want the proof, people.
But I love, some of my favorite lines are Gutman's like, I love talking to a man who loves talking to a man who likes to talk.
Yeah. Well, I love the sequence where he palms the bill, and he's just like sitting there, and Spade's like getting to do his tough guy routine, and he's just like, I was just messing with you, like just because he can.
And it's interesting how out of everybody, he's the one, and of course the next one we'll talk about is Wilmer, but he's so willing to throw Wilmer under the bus as well. And
My
he's
boy
like,
Wilmer. I feel so bad for Wilmer.
and I think, what's his line, like, Wilmer, you've been like a son to me, but I could always find another son. There's only one Maltese Falcon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just that, this is the first time we've seen a villain that's like the ultimate pragmatist, even to the point of sacrificing human life, as weird as that sounds. But he's just so cavalier about it. But like, it's interesting that at the beginning of that scene, he's very unwilling to throw Wilmer under the bus. So like, I don't know what the relationship is there, but like, they've clearly been together like in business for a very long time. And so it's very interesting that that's kind of the one vulnerable point you see of Gutman, and I often wonder why that is exactly. Maybe Wilmer saved his life one time or something.
Subtext there, I don't know, but I also, and the way, for such a big man, I love the way they shoot Sidney Greenstreet in this movie. It's always from below, so like his gut is like almost like in the shot, so he looks even bigger. From when you're doing it, and all the camera angles in this movie, you can see the ceilings, which was sort of rare for this time in movie history, because it's shot sort of from below to make everything seem just a little off kilter. But I love, when when they find out, the Falcon is nothing but lead, and Greenstreet looks like he's about ready to have a stroke after he's done,
I thought he was going to tilt over, man. I really did.
But then 10 minutes later, after he's pulled a gun on Bogart, asking for the money that he's owed and everything, and then he just sort of gives that he gives that very happy wave to them goodbye.
Like, oh well, bye. Guess they caught the murderer.
Off to see somebody.
It's like freaking Billy Crystal, The Princess Bride. Have fun storming the castle. Where are you, man? But like, and that's the thing though. But he like kind of like rallies them back. He's just like, no, it's still out there. Let's go find it and stuff. It's just like, man, this is one unique character right here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And now let's move on though to Wilmer, played by Elisha Cook Jr., who actually usually played these kinds of roles. Usually played these kind of gunslinging guys who got thrown under the bus and was really good at it.
Well, I mean, like, look. No. Not that you should have a ton of sympathy for Wilmer, but like the way that he gets shafted at the end is actually pretty kind of, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, because he's got all these people who are no prizes themselves around him deciding what his fate is going to be.
Exactly.
But one of my favorite things in the movie is after he's been knocked out by Bogart and he starts to come to and he sees all four of them just staring at him, and the camera pans to each one of them.
Those camera pans are so man, they're so great. It's just like, wow. Like that's just it's amazing how those shots work together.
Can you imagine coming to and seeing those four staring at you?
Nope. Well, I mean, like, and it's telling that he knows, just like, crap, like.
But he's kind of underrated because I love his whole presence in the movie. How, even from the beginning, before you know who he is, like when Bogart, opens up the curtain and you see him standing in the alley, up staring at the apartment or whatever. And then finally, when you get to the hotel lobby and Bogart sits down and he's got a newspaper in front of him and he brings it down and you realize that's who it is and everything. But Bogart, and Spade just loves playing head games with Wilmer.
That's the thing. It's just like, God, but like Spade is just a sadist, man. Like he's like, it's like he knows the very first moment he sees him in the hotel that this is how, it's like he knows he's going to pin everything on him right there. And then the whole rest of the movie, he's just psychologically working on him to get him in a vulnerable state. But the thing that really stuck out to me the second time watching this, that scene where Spade first suggests that they make Wilmer the fall guy. He steps forward, and he's pretty much stepping up on and trying to intimidate him. And the look on his face is amazing. I mean, like, we've all had somebody in our lives that have pushed us to the brink and we're just like, you better get away from me or you better stop this right now. But like, it is such an amazing expression on his face. And it might seem like a weird thing to fixate on, but it's just like he has like tears forming in his eyes just because I am sick of you ragging on me, this complete stranger. And this is a guy who, he's killed people in his life, and yet he's being moved to tears because of Sam Spade's words. So that's just it's just a really, really amazing shot.
I know. And and I guess, we can move on to favorite scenes right now, but that whole last 20 minutes of the movie where it's mainly ridiculous. Just the five of them. It's like, and apparently John Huston wrote a very detailed script almost, and they rehearsed that scene almost like it was a play.
Good.
The five of them. He said he wanted them to be as memorized as possible for it, and wanted them, to not. He didn't want to have to cut away too much and everything. But they play it so well, and it's just all five of these agendas coming together.
Yeah. Well, what you just said explains a lot of what I was going to say about that scene. Was that the dialogue and the way they move from line to line feels incredibly natural in that scene. And there's a lot of exposition that gets explained there. And yet none of it gets lost. And all of them seem like they are perfectly saying what their characters would say. I don't see Peter Lorre in that scene. I literally see Joel Cairo looking out for himself, and I see Gutman trying to broker the deal to get the thing that he's been chasing for so long. It's an impeccable scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's so many. It's weird when I was thinking about favorite scenes for this movie. It's weird. I kind of see it all just kind of as a big whole. You don't think about, because it just moves so effortlessly together. And just amazing. I will one fun cameo to talk about in this movie though is John Huston's father has a cameo. He's Captain Jacoby. Who comes through the door after being murdered, bringing the Falcon. He put his father in there for good luck.
Well, that's another great line right after that. Didn't get to that far with that many holes in him.
Yeah, and of course, Huston would later direct his father in his Oscar-winning role in Sierra Madre. So it's great lineage there. But have there any favorite scenes that you have that we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, aside from the very end and the 20 minutes at the end, you're right. Like what you say when it comes to the movie works so well as a whole, building to that moment, to those 20 minutes. But I love, I really like the first scene of Sam and Archer's widow together, if only because it reveals a lot about who Sam is. Because again, there's so many characters like this that come after him that it's just like the way Bogart plays everything so cavalier, especially in that scene. You're dealing with the widow, but you're also two-timing with her, and yet he still shows her no sympathy, in that situation. And it's just like I was just watching that thinking wow, you got no you're not going to show sympathy to anyone, are you? You got nothing to go for here. And it just kind of reveals this guy is out for number one. He's out for himself, but there still seems to be a little glimmer of that kind of do the right things mentality in there. So like, and it really kind of showed the single-mindedness of Sam as well. But no, like the whole thing is just an amazing build up to the end. But I really love, and I actually wanted to ask you about the final line of this movie, because
Mhm.
I've seen some theories out there that the Maltese Falcon in the movie just never actually existed. It's just a legend, or that it is out there and this was just a fake type thing. I wanted to know where you stand on that, because I don't know if the Maltese Falcon ever even actually exists in the world that this movie inhabits.
Yeah, I honestly think after watching the movie several times and thinking about that final line, I think, when he says, the stuff that dreams are made of, everybody has something they're chasing after.
Mm-hmm.
And and we either sink to very low lows to get to where we want to get to what we want, or we sort of rise above rise above the fold and try and take the high ground and everything. But I think life would be boring if we didn't have things to dream about or chase after.
Yeah.
So which is why I think even after they find out that Falcon they have is a fake, Gutman and Cairo were still willing to go out and, search for it again, because, having something to dream for and to work for, makes life worthwhile.
Yeah, and it actually a really good point there is just the sense that they're so quick to take up the chase again, and they
Hmm.
leave this trail of bodies in their wake that they really don't seem
I
to
know.
care about. And that there was a line that Sam says to them, where it's something like, I know, like how much human life it's worth to you, or something like that. I'm probably not saying it correctly, but he eventually it's like a smart aleck remark toward them. It's a biting retort, but it's also him saying like, you people don't know the damage that you cause, and
Yeah.
you just don't care. And like, you're right, that's kind of a good commentary there too, in terms of that final line of that, you can chase your dreams, but man, if it's going to cause, harm to other people, might not be a dream worth chasing. And and so I don't know, I always just kind of thought the ending meant, you're right, like in a philosophical sense, everybody has something they're chasing after, everybody has dreams that they got to go after, but at the same time, maybe it's not even there, maybe it is just a dream. And so it's a lot of stuff packed into, like a 6-7 word sentence. So like,
Yeah. Yeah. And the way the Bogart delivers it, so melancholy and everything,
yeah.
it's just a perfect stamp on the movie, and really kind of a fitting entrance to film noir, because film noir, even though a lot of times the villains might get comeuppance at the end, not everything is tied with a pretty bow. Life still
Mhm.
goes on at the end, and there's disappointments and everything, and that's sort of the crux of what film noir is.
Yeah, and don't ever forget, Sam isn't an innocent in this. All right,
No, no, no,
Sam is not the heroes per se of this story. He's a villain just like the rest of them. I mean, when she asks him, when O'Shaughnessy asks him, if we would have found the real Falcon, would that have made any difference to you in
no.
turning me in? And all he says is just like, oh, well, that would have been another, side of, like, another weight on your side of the scale. Like,
Yeah.
he's still not a good person. Okay, he has a
No.
code that he's following, which I guess is good, but I mean, like, he's still a villain himself in this. He's just clearly the least of these.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an interesting character study, this movie.
Yeah.
Really deep, and really ahead of its time, and really sort of set the standard for what was to come. One of my favorite film genres.
Oh yeah.
Can watch film noir all day. But talking about, though, just a little bit of trivia, though, it's interesting how I've on this podcast before I've kind of talked about my dislike for remakes, and in actual reality, this movie
Oh.
is a remake times two, kind of,
Okay.
because Warner Brothers had had the rights to this movie and released it in 1931 under the name The Maltese Falcon, and a very sort of clean cut version because the book was considered kind of lewd at the time, and so they and but it was a very sort of whitewashed version and didn't do well. Then 5 years later, Warner Brothers releases it again under another title called Satan Met a Lady. and
Can I talk to the people who branded that film?
and
I'm just saying, what's your core audience with that title?
I have no idea, but it was actually treated more comedically, and the falcon was turned into a ram's horn.
Sure. That has the same ring to it.
So it flopped again, and Warner Brothers held on to it. And then in another 5 years, they said, we're going to give this movie one last shot and remake it again. And it turned into this movie.
Wow, good thing they did. Well, yes, but for the most part, remakes are terrible, except for when one of them is called Satan Meets a Lady.
Yeah. But it's so great. And also, I love the guy who designed the actual Falcon statuette, Fred Sexton. We have to give credit to. He created an iconic movie prop.
One of the best of all time.
That actually just sold, I think, in 2013 at an auction for $4 million.
Really? God.
Yeah. I think there were a couple of them, but it sold for that. And yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the most famous movie props of all time, and yet, as Hitchcock would say, it's a MacGuffin. It could have been anything. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It's kind of one of the original MacGuffins, isn't it? It's just like this thing they're all chasing, and it literally doesn't matter at all. Like,
but you wouldn't want the movie without it. So it's
exactly. It's the thing you think that you're chasing, but then all of a sudden,
it's just it's really, really amazing. And this movie apparently was a very easy shooting and everything, and the cast really got along, and they said the cast really buddied around together off screen, and Bogart and Greenstreet and Laurie became great friends, and they said Mary Astor kind of became one of the boys.
That's nice.
And that they all liked hanging around with each other, and Houston had a very sort of laid back set, and they almost treated it as if they were doing a play, and it had a very great camaraderie the whole time.
Well, it shows.
Yeah, and you can kind of feel that, because even though these characters are all sort of antagonistic to each other, there's kind of a brotherhood between all of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, like he does like Houston does a lot of one takes in this movie that kind of like lets the actors breathe with their characters, and again, it just really creates that air that you're watching the character instead of the actor.
Yeah, and it's interesting when this movie came out. Actually, did for being sort of unique and trailblazing, did very well. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who usually hated everything, said it was the best mystery thriller of the year, and says young Mr. Houston gives promise of becoming one of the smartest directors in his field.
Wow!
So got one right, Bosley.
Did he find like a 20 on the street that day or something?
I don't know.
He doesn't like anything.
I know, he hated Psycho. He hated a bunch of the movies we've talked about. But the movie was nominated for 1941 is kind of an interesting year. It was nominated for 3 Oscars. Nominated for Best Picture. Sidney Greenstreet was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and John Huston didn't get a Best Director nomination, but was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. So it got 3, but 1941 was the year of Citizen Kane as well. But Citizen Kane only won 1 Oscar for Orson Welles, and the Best Picture winner, this was the year of Citizen Kane and Maltese Falcon, but How Green Was My Valley won.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it was going to be How Green Was My Valley year. Come on.
Which nothing against How Green Was My Valley, directed by John Ford, which is a very well-made, touching movie.
It is.
But it's not in the same league as Maltese Falcon or Citizen Kane. 2
of these are in the top 25 of the AFI's all-time list. How Green Was My Valley is not.
Yeah. So it's interesting how the Oscars kind of are representative of their time. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. But
this was a year they
yeah. And apparently, though, even though this wasn't a time for sequels, it says as a result of the film's success, Warner Brothers immediately made plans to produce a sequel entitled The Further Adventures of the Maltese
Oh,
Falcon,
come on.
which Houston was to direct in early 1942. However, due to Houston's high demand as a director and unavailability of the major cast, the sequel was never made.
Thank you, Jesus. We don't need to know where these people went. I don't need.
I know.
I don't need Sam
And
Spade
it's so,
going at it again.
and it's such a bad title for a film, or The Further Adventures of the Maltese.
The hell is this, a TV serial? I mean, come on, man. This makes no sense. The Falcon isn't going on the adventures.
Yeah.
Oh
it's
man.
just,
Well, thank
it's
God
interesting.
that
But
didn't
you know what?
happen.
Yeah. And the movie got its due later on in 1989. It was one of the first movies to be put on the Library of Congress's National Film Registry.
Great.
And the AFI, of course, loves it. In 1998, it was number 23 on the top 100 list. And then in 2007, it was number 31. Number 6 on the greatest mystery films of all time. Number 26 on the most thrilling films of all time. The Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of is the number 14 greatest quote of all time.
Oh. So, I mean, and
And
rightfully
apparently, and you know what? The Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of is actually based off of Act 4 of Shakespeare's The Tempest, where Prospero says, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on." And Houston kind of played that around there. So borrowed from Shakespeare there, actually.
Nice. Well, all the best films do. So,
yeah. So yeah, interesting. But just yeah, Falcon is a very famous, well-regarded classic, but I think our generation, there was a time in the 70s where there was a big Bogart revival because the 70s was very anti-establishment, and Bogart is a very anti-establishment figure. And he became sort of this icon in the 70s for college students. And apparently there was a time when college students in the early 70s could quote every Bogart movie ever made, and Falcon was one of those touchstone movies. But then in ensuing decades, while it's still well regarded as a classic, it's not quite the cultural touchstone for our generation. So it's one of those movies I wish more people of our age group knew, and I hope that our talking about it today will get more people to watch it, because it's short, it moves fast, it's fascinating to watch.
oh yeah, and I mean, like, it inspires great movies, like movies that all of us have seen, and all of us have talked about and thought about for a long time. Like, just, I have to bring it into the superhero realm, but this year, Logan with Hugh Jackman, very much a film noir. And, like, there's a lot of, parallels you can draw between a Sam Spade and what, Logan is in that movie. But there's one film I want to draw everyone's attention to, because I think it's very heavily influenced by the Maltese Falcon. And it was in 2005. It's a film called Brick with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, a very young Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And it's basically a film noir in the style of like the 1940s and 50s. Like, they use the kind of dialogue that was used in the 40s and 50s films, but it's set in a 2005 California high school. And, there's a character that's he's like a loner outsider, and he's trying to investigate a death of one of his friends and everything. And he gets drawn into like the criminal underworld, but yet he's still staying above it all, even though he starts playing all these people against each other. And I was just, when I watched that movie for the first time, I thought, like, this is literally the Maltese Falcon, but in a high school, in a modern day high school. And it's just amazing. And that movie was written and directed by Rian Johnson, who most recently did the movie Looper and who's doing Star Wars Episode 8. And so it's like, these kind of films can really influence people to create other great films. And once you see these films that really influence not only today's filmmakers, but yesterday's filmmakers and even more back filmmakers, you really see where film kind of gets its trends and gets its its ideas in terms of how we look at our characters, and how some heroes aren't perfect, and how some heroes are actually deeply flawed, but they can still end up doing the right thing. And there's just wonderful things that are being played within this movie.
Absolutely. It's a touchstone for so many reasons, and yet I feel like sometimes when you call a movie a trailblazer and a touchstone, people feel like they're watching homework or something like that. They have to appreciate its historical value, but it's just an entertaining movie.
Oh, it's just good. It's just good narrative.
You get sucked into the characters and everything. So, Yeah, I encourage everyone to watch it. It's one of Bogart's best. It's one of Houston's best. It's it's beautifully shot. Everything about it is just absolutely amazing.
Yep.
So we could go on and on about it, but
I really
let's
could.
let's let's kind of come to a conclusion here, though, Jeremy. Any more plugging you want to do for us before we close out here?
Sure. Well, this is our first podcast of July. So we want to thank you all for another amazing month of June. We once again broke our download record. So thank you very, very much. The podcast just continues to grow, and we're growing with it. We're doing a lot of really, really cool things. We're kind of retooling some things this summer in terms of what the front row is and what, the kind of shows we're going to be producing. There's a lot of really cool announcements coming. But later on this week, you can be hearing on Wednesday, we will be dropping our Beyond the Mouse on Newsies. We have the cast of the Legacy Theater in Springfield, Illinois' production of Newsies, the regional premiere of that. We got the star Owen Beans. We got one of the other stars, Courtney Wick. They are going to be coming on to record and talk about the classic 1992 musical Newsies, starring Batman himself, Christian Bale. But then later this week, on Friday, we'll also be releasing a little bit of a tease for the new show that's going to be taking over the Friday drop dates on the Front Row feed. As you know, Brandon and Scott's Zonasodes, they have spun off onto their own feed, and they're doing very, very well. And I mean, if you're listening to just this episode, go find the Zonasodes. They are amazing, and they are really, really fun to watch and listen to. But we're going to give you a little tease this Friday of what the next show that's going to be kind of being a launch off of the Front Row brand. We're going to give you a little preview there. So stay tuned, everyone. And then, of course, next Monday, we're going to be bringing you our full disclosure on Spider-Man Homecoming. So look forward to all of those. And, of course, as always, go to thefrontrowmoviereviews.com or find us on Facebook at The Front Row Movie Reviews to find anything we're going to be doing.
And we may actually be bringing you another classic later this month, I think, if we can get it together.
We are going to be bringing them.
Last July, Allison and Jeremy and I sat down and talked about Yankee Doodle Dandy, and I thought, okay, around 4th of July time, let's talk about something else American or something like that. And I thought, well, let's talk about a movie about a historical event. And I was sitting watching TCM, like I do a lot, last month, and All the President's Men was on. And I thought, this is such a good movie, and we haven't talked about too many movies of the 70s, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, and actually, very big announcement. We've got a very special guest for All the President's Men dropping later this month, Mr. John O'Connor, who is the Associated Press Capital correspondent in Springfield, Illinois. So he's going to be on the show. He's a very good journalist, and he's going to join us there and talk about All the President's Men.
Great. So we got that to look forward to, and then still planning classics for the rest of the year, but we got a lot of great options to talk about and everything. And we'll get Allison back on here with us too. She's taking a little bit of a hiatus, but we're going to get her back on here. So yeah, lots to look forward to.
Maybe we'll talk Young Frankenstein at some point, right?
Yeah, or maybe it's time to talk John Wayne at some point too.
Or maybe The Searchers. Yeah, I feel like we haven't been waiting for those, right?
We might have to do the lost episodes.
The lost episodes of classics. Oh, man.
So great. Yeah, so a lot of great content coming your way. So as we kick off July here in grand style with Bogart and the stuff that dreams are made of, I am Brandon Davis.
I'm Jeremy Geckner.
And we will see you in the front row.
That was awesome.